City inspection programs for rental properties don't actually lead to better living conditions for tenants, but do lead to less affordable housing. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. So I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the topic of the city inspection and licensing programs for rental properties and for landlords. So I've covered this topic a few different times before, and I keep bringing up the same points. And the points are, and this is from my personal experience, that it doesn't actually solve the problem that it is meant to solve, okay? And that problem is that, hey, there are some landlords who don't maintain their properties, okay? The very small amount of landlords who aren't maintaining their properties correctly, they still are able to get away with it because the rental inspection programs, they don't work, okay? Instead, they punish the good landlords who are doing things 99% correctly, and then those good landlords are forced to raise their rents, leading to less affordable housing for tenants, okay? So it actually hurts the tenants in the long run. And the article I have today is actually covering this, and it's actually from a very pro-tenant side, right? And they saw the exact same things that I've been talking about for quite a while, and they're like, hey, these inspection programs are not working as intended. Now, they came up with a different conclusion at the very end of the article than I did, but what do you expect when you're talking to very pro-tenant, anti-landlord people? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Do you believe that rental inspection programs actually lead to better living conditions for tenants? Okay? Or what do you think that they actually accomplish? My personal opinion is that it's a cash grab for the bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy is out there levying these fines against the landlords, and meanwhile, nothing truly is being accomplished. The bad landlords, the very few that there are, they're not being stopped. Okay, they just don't care. So, it doesn't really improve anything. But anyway, let's get into this article. So this article is coming from nextcity.org, and it says, "Why does building inspection fail tenants? A professor explains." Robin Bartram spent 2 years shadowing Chicago's building inspectors. Here's what she learned. She's a professor. She's not a landlord, but she has some interesting insights from what she observed. Don't agree with everything she says, and I'll get into it as we go through this article. In a housing crisis, much of the attention goes to keeping people housed, building new housing, and keeping that housing affordable. But the deteriorating quality of much urban housing and the impact this can have on the day-to-day lives of tenants often fails to get as much attention. In most cities, responsibility for monitoring housing quality falls on a network of building inspectors who can levy fines against negligent landlords. In her new book, Stacked Decks: Building Inspectors and the Reproduction of Urban Inequality, Tulane's sociology professor Robin Bartram shows how and why these systems are structurally set up to fail tenants. Bartram spent 2 years embedded with building inspectors in Chicago, shadowing them during the course of their work, as well as interviewing politicians, tenants, and landlords. She combined this field work with analysis of the city's building code and inspection records. What she found is that inspectors are more likely to empathize with small landlords than with low-income tenants, and that even when inspectors aligned with tenants, their attempts at punishing bad landlords could backfire. This interview has been edited for length and clarity. So she actually went around with the building inspectors in the city of Chicago, and hey, guess what she found out? The building inspectors actually empathize with small landlords, okay? Now, this is a good thing. Obviously, the building inspectors, and I've talked to different city inspectors, etc. They realize, hey, this is a business. This is, what people are doing, and most of the time, most landlords, they want to operate their business, within the law. They want to keep their properties well maintained, because you don't make money if the property is a danger. You don't make money when your property can't be rented out because it's not meeting the inspection standards. So obviously a lot of small landlords also, they're not rich. That's the other thing, okay? a lot of landlords, especially the small ones, own one property, maybe one single family house or a duplex. They might even be renting out the other side of a duplex in the house where they live themselves, especially in a place like Chicago. So it doesn't surprise me at all that the building inspectors are going to be more on the side and sympathize more with landlords than they are with the tenants. Robin Bartram. One of the unfortunate things about inspectors is that they do tend to overlook tenants. I think it would help if they were less able to do so, though tenant unions or more collective efforts on the part of tenants and elected officials to make people more aware of what tenants deal with. In the book, I talk about how inspectors sympathize with struggling homeowners, which is not something you would expect. But by contrast, they don't tend to sympathize with tenants. A large part of that is just social distance. Very often they are going after big landlords, but it's not necessarily to protect tenants. It's more punitive towards big landlords. Yeah, like I said, I'm not surprised at all that building inspectors actually are going to sympathize with landlords more than they are with tenants. That's just the facts, okay? So when a building inspector comes in there and they say, hey, you need to fix A, B, and C, and they know, okay, these building inspectors know that, hey, those are extremely expensive things to repair. And not all landlords are financially capable of getting the things repaired in the time allotted. And, some of the stuff is like, they for example, recently passed new lead pipe laws up in Ohio, right? And I don't remember exactly which city. It might be the whole state, but imagine if you are a building inspector, you go in there and they say, hey, you have to replace all of the pipes inside of your single family rental here. Well, some landlords might not have the cash to do that, okay? It is very expensive to go in there and do some of the repairs that are necessary, but at the same time, yeah, those fixes do need to be made. So you can understand why the building inspector has sympathy, though, for the landlord, because if they tell the landlord, hey, you have to spend these tens of thousands of dollars doing this repair, and the landlord isn't able to do it, they lose their livelihood, they lose their ability to make rental income. And not only that, but the tenant would lose their house as well. So yeah, trying to force a landlord's hand when they might not have the money to do the repairs isn't exactly the best idea, in my opinion, and that's why some leeway should be given. You found that landlords with citations for building code violations would make improvements, but then raise the rent on their tenants to pay for it. Are smaller landlords more likely to pass on those expenses, or is it more common among large landlords? Bartram. Some evidence suggests that smaller landlords might try to keep things affordable as opposed to professional landlords who care the most about the bottom line, and perhaps making repairs is more of an excuse to increase rents than a necessity. But I don't actually have data on the comparison between types. Now, this is where she loses me, okay? She's like, well, some small landlords, they might keep rents low. And like, no, listen here, okay? The majority of landlords, if their expenses go up, they have to raise the rent to be able to cover the cost of those repairs, okay? And if that makes the housing less affordable for the tenants inside, so be it. But do not expect a landlord to take all of their profit out of their pocket and just give it away so that they can do repairs that these inspectors are pointing out. So my point being, yes, large landlords are quicker to raise the rent, right? But small landlords are doing the exact same thing. We have to raise the rent if we have a large number of repairs that are made. If an inspector came up to me right now and said, hey, in that duplex you own, you're going to have to go in there and do $20,000 to replace the sewer line that goes out to the street. Well, guess what, right? I might have the money to do that, but I'm going to raise the rents to help cover the cost of that repair. Okay, that is what I have to do. Otherwise, I'm just taking a loss, and it could take me, a very, very long time to recover the amount of money that I spent doing those repairs. It's definitely the notion among inspectors that these big equity-backed professional landlords, that big buildings mean that owners or managers have funds, and therefore there was really no excuse not to be keeping up with the building code. The smaller, maybe owner-occupied landlords, inspectors are much more likely to only fight people for really serious violations. That distinction about who really does have money might not be accurate in the real world, but it's one inspectors buy into. And it actually is pretty true, okay? Owner-occupied landlords, small landlords do have a lot less money to do these repairs. And for that reason, it makes sense that the inspectors give more leeway. And it doesn't make sense to me that the author is so anti-landlord that, they just basically want to throw all landlords under the bus. Not every landlord is super wealthy. I've been saying that for a long time. Not every landlord has huge emergency reserves to last them for, a year without getting any rent, or to be able to do a complete remodel of a house and not raise the rent. That's ridiculous, okay? Just keep in mind that a lot of landlords are small. The majority of us are doing everything right, and we just want to comply with the law and run our business without interference. And what we don't like is when an inspector will come by, start nitpicking little stuff, and make us do a whole bunch of repairs that aren't necessary for the tenant. Okay, so the article goes on. It's more stuff like this. I'm going to put a link to the article in the description so you can read more into it. But I found it interesting that this person, who obviously is very anti-landlord, came to a lot of the same conclusions that I have been talking about for a while. That basically, the building inspections, they don't actually work to keep the property in good condition, and it found that building inspections actually hurt the tenants by making housing less affordable, because when landlords have to fix something that is found in the inspection, they just tack that on to the cost of the rent. So I'm going to skip down to the very bottom of the paragraph, or the bottom of this story, right? And it says, to the larger causes of this, you've expressed concern that recent federal funding puts more emphasis on subsidizing new construction and allocates less funding for maintaining and repairing housing. And Bartram, there's a lot more attention to enabling and incentivizing new construction as opposed to keeping existing buildings in good, decent condition. This is another way that we could remove the correlation between building inspections and rent increases. If there was some kind of subsidized, or dare I say, free maintenance, if 50 state governments or the federal government provided the maintenance teams who went building by building along with building inspectors and did some work. So I hate this, right? Because this ignores a huge factor in the whole rental property market, which is this is a free market. And the problem is that the reason why a lot of these properties, they fall into disrepair, is because we have artificial price controls that are put onto properties in certain places by the government, okay? And instead of allowing the free market to dictate how much rental prices are, and allow property owners to come in there and raise rents, do repairs, do upgrades, etc., keep their buildings in good shape, the government is actually fighting against us on that, and wants us to keep properties dilapidated and in horrible shape so that the rents are cheap. It really is the opposite logic of what you truly want. So you end up with a place like, New York, where you have a lot of very below par housing and landlords who are fighting against improving it because it just costs too much and they'll never be able to get a return on their profit or a return on their investment.